Hi guys, welcome to my first episode of Simply Steffi. Today I'm going to be diving into some things from my childhood. Let's just call it nostalgia. Sit back, relax, and I hope to make you smile. Here we go.
I grew up in the 80s. Yep, I'm old. My entire childhood took place from the beginning of the 80s and wrapped up into adulthood by the end of the 90s. I told you, I'm an old lady, but I won't tell you how old. At least not yet. We just met. You do the math. But I have to say that it was such a different time back then. It really was. Like literally everything about my childhood, good or bad, was completely different from the way kids are living today. Trust me, I know. I work and breathe early childhood education and development. Anywho, I didn't say that everything in my life back then was rainbows and lollipops, but I most definitely had my fair share of challenges. We'll dive deeper into that later. Don't worry, I won't forget to address some of those deeper and sometimes much darker moments in my life. But today, we're talking about nostalgia, or something like that. To be honest, I'll probably go off on a few stray tangents before I get to the point that I originally intended on making. That's just me and my personality. And if I haven't already scared you away, and you do intend on sticking around for the ride, you'll learn that about me. I tend to get distracted easily. So from this point on, if I do begin to lose focus during this, you may hear me say, squirrel! That's my cue to get back on track. And if I say squirrel, it basically means, whoops, I'm sorry, I did it again. And if you aren't already familiar with the whole squirrel thing, I got it from one of my favorite Pixar movies, Up. I know it may feel like I'm already off on a tangent. Trust me, even I'm questioning where this is going. I'm not really much of a planner when it comes to my own life. I do apply a little more structure in what I'm doing for my children and the kiddos that I work with. I just rarely apply it to myself. In fact, I think my rogue personality helps build my character, and it keeps me interesting to those around me. Hopefully, most will agree. Anyway, back to the movie, or I mean the squirrel thing, or maybe both. In the movie Up, there is a dog. Actually, there are several dogs in the movie, but the main dog's name is Doug. I love it. A dog named Doug. That's brilliant. If you watch the movie, you'll see why I love the dog named Doug. And if you don't see why I love the dog named Doug, I'm not too sure you'll be fond of me either. But please don't give up on me yet. I'm just getting started. Plus, another thing that I learned in the 80s was opposites attract. It was June 21st, 1988, when one of my favorite singers, Paula Abdul, and one very cool cat were teaching this elementary school girl that not only do opposites attract, but also cats that are cartoons are very rad, and boy can they dance. Oh shoot, squirrel! Where were we? Let's get back on track. The dog named Doug. He's awesome. He's sweet. He's loyal. He's playful, adorable, and he's looking for a forever home. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you the whole movie. No spoilers from me. I'm just here to tell you how the word squirrel ties into the movie and my daily life. The dog named Doug was a lot like me. The dog named Doug, sorry to sound redundant, but I just love saying the dog named Doug. But from now on, let's just call him TDND. Anyway, TDND would often lose his focus and become distracted, like me. However, TDND's main source of distractions were literally squirrels. Maybe it's a metaphor for his life, or maybe it's just a metaphor for my own distractions in life. Whatever it is, squirrels and distractions are present in my life, especially now that I'm an old lady. But I'll tell you more about my living, breathing squirrels at another time.
Okay, so to recap, the word squirrel means, whoops, I got distracted. And there's plenty of squirrels and distractions in my life. Wow, speaking of distracted, can someone say squirrel? Where were we? Oh yeah, good old days. The 80s and the 90s. Back when children were outside all day drinking from each other's garden hoses, playing kickball, dodgeball, tetherball, capture the flag, and Red Rover. No, Red Rover's not a vacuum. I was just as surprised by that as you. In fact, Red Rover was a popular game back when I was little. Who remembers squeezing your teammates' hands so tight, popping their fingers, and almost breaking them as you braced yourself for an impact of a member from the opposite team to come running towards you like a freaking Mack truck as they attempted to break through the chain of you and your teammates so that they could steal a member of your team and take them back to their side. The game Red Rover was an American staple in physical education classes in the 80s. Let's dive more into this gripping game. Yeah, pun was intended. So, like I said, there are two teams, which usually consist of about 10 plus kids in each team. They set up in a big space or field by holding hands with their teammates while standing across from the other team. There was usually enough space between each team so that whoever got called would be able to pick up enough speed to attempt to break through the other team's chain. One team would yell, Red Rover, send whoever they choose right over. So if they were to use my name, it would be Red Rover, send Stephanie right over. You get the point. Now, let me break this down even more for y'all. Picture this, 1988, we're all gathered in the field outside for PE class. Only, I know not everyone has a field to play in, but I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so it was very green in my area. Okay, so we're in the field for PE class. There were no uniforms at my school, so just picture like bright colored spandex, lots of color block, and windbreakers. We were a whole vibe, trust me. California, dude. We were so rad. Okay, so we have a large, bright colored group of small humans out in the field. They're separated by two teams that, mind you, were chosen by the team captains that were chosen by the teacher. Now, to keep things fair, the teacher usually tried to choose one basic middle class kid that wasn't super popular, but not, super low on the hierarchy of popularity either. He'd be one team captain, but the other team captain would usually be Mr. Popular. This kid comes from money, he's super athletic, and all the girls were crushing on him. And let's be honest, most of the boys were basically crushing on him too. Or maybe that was envy. Anyways, let's call him Captain Elite, or CE for short. So, two team captains on different ends of the social status spectrum. Choosing teams. Well, they're choosing their own teams, so it should be fair, right? Wrong. There was like this unspoken law that we all understood that we were not to choose the people that Captain Elite wanted on his side. So, if you're confused about who not to choose, these are some key factors that you should consider. Is that person athletic? Is that person big? Are they fast or strong? If so, don't pick them. They're reserved for CE. Next, look at the person and where they stand on the popularity scale. If they're popular or the captain just likes them, don't even think they're starting on your side. Through this process, a few chosen girls will make the cut on CE's side. However, the other captain would typically be left with mostly girls and any other weaker links that were still on the field. But don't feel discouraged, because if you're on the weaker side, there will still be a few strong girls, mostly future lesbians, that will hold things down on your team for you as long as they can before eventually everyone will be part of the super team. Yep, you will all eventually be standing unified for those precious minutes that are left in the game, feeling important until Captain Elite finally abruptly drops everyone's hands in his great victory for getting each of the players that he stole from the other side. Some will limp away in defeat, others will be still holding their practically dislocated arms because they held on too tight for too long. But eventually, all of the sweaty, bright clothed little soldiers will exit the battlefield and head back into the school until the next game. Ah, my childhood. Good times.
The 80s were a different time for sure. We grew up without technology for the most part. If we needed to know the answer to something, we couldn't just ask Siri or Alexa. We couldn't even look it up on YouTube or Google it. It just wasn't an option because it didn't exist. We had to read and ask others if we wanted to know something. More importantly, in the 80s, we had to get creative, or at least I did. Without risking the chance of having another squirrel moment, I'll try to stay on both topics, nostalgia and my creativity. Like I said before, the 80s were full of rad things, whether it was our awesome sense of style, our great music, blockbuster movies. I don't know. It was a pretty cool time. We gave you MTV, Ghostbusters, and E.T., the extraterrestrial. Shopping malls, home computers, and video games were all coming out. We even had our own very first virtual pets. But most importantly, we were making snow cones from Snoopy's doghouse. Well, some of us were. couple of my friends actually had the Snoopy snow cone machine. It was like Snoopy the dog sitting on top of his doghouse. And in order to use it, you would lift Snoopy up, put ice cubes into the roof under where he was sitting, then start cranking with the handle on the back of the house, all while pushing down the ice cubes with Snoopy. I think maybe it sounds a little more intense the way I'm explaining it, so just look it up. You have that luxury. Anyways, essentially, after the process, you would have crushed ice and could pour like Kool-Aid over it and call it a snow cone. It even had this cute little red snow shovel for scooping the ice out and putting it in your cup. So cute. Back in the 80s, that was a pretty sweet setup, and I really wanted one. Although I wasn't fortunate enough to own one, I did have a very creative imagination and that can-do attitude. Yeah, I knew I didn't have the original Snoopy snow cone machine, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from enjoying my own shaved ice treat whenever I felt like it. Now, the next part's slightly embarrassing, but thinking back, I was a pretty funny kid, and I suppose somewhat of an entrepreneur. Or something like that. Anyways, please don't judge me. Here we go. One day, I guess I had a hankering for an icy treat, so I came up with this idea and system that eventually I'd share with the kids in my neighborhood. I would dump all of the ice from the trays into a clean dish towel and take it outside to the curb in front of my house. I lived in a cul-de-sac. Next, I would gather the sides of the towel, creating like this small bag around it, and then secure it with a rubber band or sometimes hair scrunchie, not gonna lie. But I would put that around the top of the gathered sides to keep all the ice from falling out of the towel. Next, I'd sit down on the sidewalk, lay the towel bag of ice down, and begin to hit it with the meat tenderizer until it all broke down into like fine little pieces. I had to play around a few times before I perfected the consistency and texture of the ice, but eventually I had it down and was ready to share my creative new system with my friends. One day, I emptied all of Mom's ice trays from the freezer into a bowl. I grabbed my supplies and went outside. At some point, the neighborhood kids slowly started gathering around me to check out my setup. I began to lay down the towel and fill it with ice cubes. They watched with curiosity as I folded the edges of the towel up and secured it with a rubber band. But this time, I brought some Dixie cups and what was left of the Kool-Aid in the fridge out with me. I sat down on the curb and prepared to do my thing. I pulled out my mom's heavy silver meat tenderizer and lifted it up above the towel and swung down hard, causing that first break in those large square cubes. Everyone gasped, like, what the heck is this crazy girl doing now? Some of them even asked, but I told them I'm making snow cones, and if you wanted one, chill, let me focus. Some of them were doubtful, but they couldn't turn away. Others were skeptical, but also very excited to see where this was going. I always had that effect on people. I've always been that girl that keeps people guessing and at the edge of their seats. I continued beating the towel of ice cubes until they were all crushed into fine little shards of ice. Finally, it was the moment we had all been waiting for. I took the rubber band off the towel and began to unfold it. The group of neon-clothed children stared at the open towel of crushed ice and then looked back up at me in amazement. By that time, they all wanted one of my purple Saurus Rex snow cones. I began to shake the ice into their small Dixie cups. Some of the ice would stick to the dish towel, and I'd just pull it off. As I was pulling the remaining ice off this towel, I noticed that I pretty much destroyed another one of Mom's good dish rags. Whoops! I'll cross that bridge later. It was worth it. The neighborhood kids were trying my product, and they were liking it. In fact, some of them liked it a little too much and were already begging for more. Maybe I was onto something here. Right then, I had a light bulb. That means another brilliant idea. Tomorrow, I'll sell my product. So that night, while grocery shopping with my mom at Albertsons, I asked her to please buy me a little more Kool-Aid and some Dixie cups. Although she was confused and slightly skeptical of my plans, she was still supportive and got me the supplies I needed. Of course, I had neglected to mention the part about me using her dish towels and her meat tenderizer. I didn't think it was necessary to bore her with the small details of my entrepreneurship. Also, I may have forgotten to mention that I was also going to be charging people for my product. Meh, no big whoop. I'm sure she'd support my vision. So, the next day, I made 2 pitchers of Kool-Aid, both different flavors, obviously. After that, I grabbed my supplies and headed to the store. My store, the cul-de-sac. And I sat down on the sidewalk and started making my product. By this time, the word had spread about my icy treats. I had a handful of kids gathering around me. I advised them that today, I would be selling my cones for $0.25 a cup. I know, it seems like a lot because those cups are small. Some of them ran away to grab a quarter. Others decided not to partake that day. It was probably for the best, though, because I needed to buy more ice trays before I started filling such large orders. Also, my smaller clientele really helped me not get stuck at the office all day. I like this system. When I run out of ice, I simply close down the shop for the day and move on to a different shenanigan. Okay, where were we? Oh yeah, shenanigans. Man, boy, was I involved in plenty of them. Let me try to narrow down a topic to discuss. Give me a minute while I fumble through these dusty old files in my brain. I think most people call them memories, but to be quite honest, the memories in my brain aren't even organized. Not even the slightest. Picture someone taking a big stack of papers and just tossing them into the air. Now, what did you envision? Most of you probably saw all the papers scatter apart in the air and slowly rain back down, left in no particular order when they landed. Yep, that's pretty much my brain and memories. Everything is completely scattered and unorganized up there. In fact, some of those memories were so painful that I chose to completely block them and send those files through the shredder. I'm still not quite ready to share those memories with you. Honestly, we don't want to kill the positive vibes we have going. So keeping up with our current theme, can I say squirrel? Because boy, did I lose focus. Our topic of discussion has nothing to do with the childhood trauma that I try to file away from my prefrontal cortex. Instead, we're going to focus on my childhood shenanigans. And although I gave you a small glance into the type of kid I was back then, let me elaborate on that a little more. I wasn't your typical elementary school girl. I was always up to something. Remember how I mentioned keeping people at the edge of their seats? Well, in my day, it wasn't only the kids that were trying to figure me out. I gave most of the adults in my life a good run for their money, too. For example, I grew up the youngest of 5 siblings in my house. I was significantly younger than my siblings. Honestly, I'm not even sure that my parents planned to have another child. I was kind of that, whoops, surprise, you're having another baby kind of situation. But don't worry, I never felt like an accident too much in my home. The closest sibling to my age was 10 years older than me. And of course there were times that he just straight up told me I was an accident, but he also told me I was left on the porch, which prompted many investigations by me. My mom and the man that I would rather not call dad were the old parents at all of my school events. Most people thought they were my grandparents. I wasn't really fazed by them being older, but I did question a couple of times if my older sister and her husband were my actual parents. But anytime I brought that up to Mom, she would just become super annoyed with me. So I finally just accepted that my parents were a little more geriatric than the parents of my peers. Don't worry, I'm not having a squirrel moment. I think I still know where I'm going with this. Having older siblings and parents helped shape me into the curious, creative little person that I was meant to be. I was constantly inserting my opinion into adult conversations. I would often correct them if they missed a detail or misspoke, especially with my mom and the conversations that she would be having with other adults. When she would tell a story, I was always right there to help. I remember quite often having to abruptly interrupt her and telling her, "No, that's not how it happened." Then, even though she would be trying to give me the whole mom look, I would continue to help her out with the details of her story. I mean, I felt like it was basically my duty to help my geriatric mother hold accurate conversations with her friends and peers. Since I had so much experience conversing with adults in my own circle, I felt like I could do it anywhere. I carried my super mature conversation skills over into my daily life. When I was at school, I would interact with my teachers more like they were part of my own peer group. One example of this was when I would go to the school office. I am not saying that I was a hypochondriac or anything, but I was most definitely a frequent flyer at our elementary school office. The office staff there was great back then. I would show up to the office, step up to the counter that was about eye level with me at the time, and in a casual, nonchalant voice, I would say, "Oh, hey, Carol. I'm extremely nauseated and I have a violent headache." Carol and I were on a first-name basis. She would smile graciously and motion me back to the sick room. The ironic thing about this is now I work at that same school. I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do there later. First, I want to paint a better picture of the type of adolescent I was back then, because my career may surprise you. Moving right along, Carol, the office lady, and I were close. She also got to know my mother quite well due to all of the phone conversations they would have. Thanks to me, I was basically a friendship matchmaker. They get along great. I usually heard Carol making those calls. They went something like this. Hi Donna, it's Carol from Kaiser. Yes, I'm doing fine, thank you. I have Stephanie here in the office with me. Yes, she's complaining that she isn't feeling well. Yes, she is right here. Would you like to speak with her? Now, this is the part that I didn't understand because everything sounded positive and pleasant when I heard Carol speaking with my mother. However, as soon as she put me on the phone, things usually took a different turn. Once I got on the phone, this is how it would go. Hello? Hi, Mom. No, I'm not faking it. No, I'm really sick. No, this does not happen every day at the same time. What are we doing in class right now? I don't know. I think they're starting math. Mom, my head hurts so bad. Please. No, I'm not going to start running around and acting fine once we get home, Mom. Please don't yell at me. Please come get me. Okay, yes, I'm sorry. I'll put Carol back on the phone. And that was a pretty standard interaction between me, Carol, and my mom. Except for those times where Mom would be so livid that she didn't even want to talk to me on the phone before arriving at the school to pick me up. On those days, I knew it was best to just quietly exit the school and get in the car. I already knew what would happen next. There was no need to fuel the fire. Mom would enter the school, come up to the office, and in a voice that she only used in places like school, my doctor, or on the phone to strangers, she would politely say something like this. Hi, Carol. Thanks for calling me. I am not sure what is going on with Stephanie. I'll take her home and make her rest while I give the doctor a call. She has been having a lot of ear infections. Maybe it's time to see the ENT, but I'm sure she'll be returning to school tomorrow. But if not, I'll let you know. Then we would walk what always felt like the Green Mile to her baby blue Ford Aerostar minivan in the complete silence. Now remember this van because it was involved in many of my shenanigans. Once we got to the van, Mom would grab the handle of the back door and slide it open. Now when I say slid it open, that may be a bit of an understatement because my mom opened that door with such force that I really felt like she was about to rip that thing off. Don't even get me started on the amount of force that little lady used to close the door. Sheesh, my mom was strong. She only stood about 5 feet tall max and was still a force to be reckoned with when she was mad. Once Mom hopped in the driver's seat, she would make sure to secure her door with just as much force. I'm sure it was for safety purposes. Next comes the drive home. Now I live very close to the school, 0.3 miles to be precise. When you would leave the school, the crosswalk at the end of the street went directly to the back gate of my house. Mom must have thought I shouldn't be walking in my condition, and that's why she picked me up in the van. She must have been very worried about me because once she put the pedal to the metal, I understood exactly why that Ford van had the word arrow in it, because man did that thing fly. I think we were actually flying some of the time. It was the fastest ride of my life. Sometimes I would close my eyes and imagine that I was on a plane or in a spaceship, but I would always know when we were home by our landing. Our house was at the bottom of our driveway, so normally Mom would just slowly drive down it and park. However, on the days that she had to pick me up from school early, she would instead whip into our cul-de-sac, catch some air, and land at the bottom of the driveway. She was quite the precision driver. Once we entered the house, Mom would make it clear to me that I better rest because I would be going back to school the next day and staying the entire time. I just smiled and thought to myself, we'll play tomorrow by ear. this is Simply Steffi, and I'm signing off for the day. Holy cow, guys, I just finished my very first episode of my podcast. I know, it was kind of just me fumbling through my words and silly stories from my childhood. And hey, it may continue to be that for a while. But hopefully, I'll be able to have some of my friends and family or any other guests that might want to come on so we can have an open dialogue. But right now, I'm here just trying to spread smiles and kindness. So everyone have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.